The word is assets. The first time Sister Kenny came in contact with an acute case of polio, she was 100 miles out in the bush country of Australia. To the amazement of many doctors, the several children she treated fully recovered. When asked what she did, she replied, "I used what I had: water, heat, blankets, and my own hands." Most people are inclined to overlook assets close at hand that would enable them to move toward a higher degree of accomplishment. The lesson seems to be, don't overlook the ordinary or the commonplace. That may be the source of some of your greatest assets.
For your free copy of Words from Unity, write Unity Television, Unity Village, Missouri.
I'm Barbara Bain, and remember, the word is assets.
To realize this great social ideal is the work of education and organization. The working classes must be aroused. They must be made to hear the trumpet call of solidarity, economic solidarity, and political solidarity. One great all-embracing industrial union, and one great all-embracing political party, and both revolutionary to the core, two hearts with but a single soul. The modern tool of production must belong to those who made use of it, whose freedom, yea, whose very lives depend upon it. 100 years ago, the collective ownership of the individual tool would have been absurd. Today, the private ownership of the collective tool is a crime. This crime is at the foundation of every other that fits the your society. And from its subtellers exude the festering stenches of all sweatshop civilization.
The first quote I'm going to read is from Unity magazine from September 1918, a piece by Charles Fillmore called Metaphysical Law of the I Am. And he writes, "Last week a man came saying he was in harmony with and wished to join Unity, but he also wanted to join the Socialist Society. He had been reading on socialism and thought our work and theirs were along similar lines, and he asked if there would be any conflict if he joined both societies. Now we believe in the broadest, most generous thought. Search where you will, read what to read, think for yourself, be free. At the same time, keep your eye on the highest you can conceive and avoid all lines of thought that are contentious and argumentative. Socialism has a truth back of it. The early disciples had all things in common, and the truth as exemplified in the universe shows that everything really belongs to the whole creation. We may think, as we look at the ocean, that it is separate from the rivers and the moisture in the clouds, but the moisture in the clouds will be precipitated and find its way into the ocean. The same unity of life is seen everywhere. And when we take hold of and adjust ourselves to a right understanding of life, all things adjust themselves to us. We are all sharers in all things, and if we go about in the right way, the great law will bring to us our very own. But to succeed, we must adopt the law of love and justice. If we see contentions and take a fighting attitude towards those who seem to have more than we violate the law and cut off our supply. All the money in the world might be equally distributed, but if selfishness and ignorance of truth continue to rule, it would not be long until some men would again have more than others. If those who now have but little could exchange places with the men of wealth, they in turn would become oppressors. The same mental states will always produce the same conditions. Therefore, we must look deeper and lay hold of the law of love and unify ourselves with it. A rich man will give his money to you as freely as to his family if you find the way to his heart. Love is the great unifier. And when the whole human family are united in love, no one will lack. And there will be no soldiers, nor warships, no strife, no contention. Every knee must bow to the Prince of Peace. Jesus Christ must be held up as a standard, and all our ideas must be unified with his ideas. Do not allow any opposing, clashing thought toward anybody or anything to work in you. If you do, it will separate you from friends and finances.
What does it mean to a minister of the gospel in the present day to answer that call? It means to stand not for charity, but for justice. Not for reform, but for revolution. It means to close the doors of these splendid temples rather than live another day by taking the gold of organized oppression. It means to go again upon the highways and the byways, saying, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon us, because he hath anointed us to preach good news to the poor." It means to work, not for institutions of worship, but for a commonwealth. It means to break it once and forever with the vested interests of capitalism, to be infidel to its religion, traitor to its government, to cry with Isaiah, "Thy princes are rebellious, and companions of thieves. Everyone loveth gifts, and followeth after rewards. They judge not the widow, neither doth the cause of the fatherless come unto them. The spoil of the poor is in their house, their hands are full of blood. Bring no more incense, sing no more songs, pray no more vain prayers, observe no more ceremonies. I will have justice before worship, saith the Lord of hosts."
That if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, when machines and computers, profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will be only an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho road must be transformed so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. With righteous indignation, it will look across the seas and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia, Africa, and South America, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries and say this is not just. It will look at our alliance with the landed gentry of South America and say this is not just. The Western arrogance of feeling that it has everything to teach others and nothing to learn from them is not just. A true revolution of values will lay hand on the world order and say of war, this way of settling differences is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, of filling our nation's homes with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of peoples normally humane, sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields, physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. America, the richest and most powerful nation in the world, can well lead the way in this revolution of values. That is nothing except a tragic death wish to prevent us from reordering our priorities so that the pursuit of peace will take precedence over the pursuit of war.
They are correct in a sense.
I got to say that for you.
First of all,
make you rich and that'll make them happy.
First of all, I got into this business of praying for people to get money and teaching people to get money because in my ministry I found out that that was people's greatest problem. And I believe and I know that Jesus met people at the point of their need. Whatever their need was, Jesus met that need. When people were hungry, he provided bread. And there is a case in the Gospels where the apostle came to Jesus and said, Lord, we don't have money to pay our taxes. This is tax day, by the way. And Jesus told Peter to go fishing, and he would find money in the fish's mouth. And so, frankly, the Bible is a book of prosperity. The Bible also says, and God says this in the Bible, Beloved, I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers.
Lift up your heads. The day of your redemption draweth nigh. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Compare this call, my friends, with what you hear from the Orthodox pulpit. The appeal to selfishness. The exhortation to save yourself. Compare it with the appeal of Orthodox politics to the appetite alone, and see if it does not move you more. Is not this Christ worthy of your following? This cause entitled to your highest service? Let us consecrate ourselves to it today, to the service of Christ in humanity, to the bringing in of the redeemed world. Let us, in emulation of our fathers, pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our...
Oh, how glorious it is to live in the consciousness of God's presence. How God's presence dispels all doubts and fears and automatically turns your darkness into light. For God did say, let there be light, and there was light. Right. Let dry land appear. And there it was. As it was, so it is. Let us rejoice continually to be able to live together and express that which you have long sought for. The universal brotherhood of man and the conscious realization of the fatherhood of God, for which you all have prayed. Well, just as it is right here, so shall it be someday all over this wide extended plain. And you will find the abundance of the fullness of the consciousness of good and no space vacant of the fullness thereof. What a glorious privilege. What a glorious privilege. Why you can live as men and women, walking circumspectly in the world. And the best of all, is when I purge you of that dross of sin.
It's true.
The tension, the pace, the way it seems at times so artificial. In recent years, one of the answers has been to start a new community. Communes and other kinds of experimental communities have been founded all across the country. Nearly everyone has thought about what an ideal world would be like, but few people have actually tried to put their thoughts to work, tried to create a community according to their ideas. Experimental communities are not new. This village is called Arden. It was founded in 1900 for many of the same reasons that people are starting communes today. Take a look at Arden, and you get an idea of what can happen when you plan and create a village. You can see the successes and failures, the problems that are solved, and the new tensions that are born.
I'm not free. Get it into your head that if you want to be rich, you got to off the bourgeoisie. So get your ass with the class that will struggle to set you free.
Well, every time I look in the 3-volume book, I understand it. How they make a lot of shit you don't need and teach you how to demand it. And I learned how the masses are divided into classes that must struggle throughout history. So get your ass with the class that was not, but one day all will be.
Get your load with the mode that will eliminate all classes.
Eliminate all classes.
Get your load with the mode that will end private property.
Goodbye, private property.
The division of labor makes it you and your neighbor an underpriced commodity. So get your load with the mode that will end all this absurdity.
All right, now hit it.
Get your ass with the class that's a wage away from hunger.
Wage away.
Get your ass with the class that is destined by history.
It's destined by history.
Get it into your head that if you want to be rich, you got to off the bourgeoisie. So get your ass with the class that will struggle to set you free.
I'd read Veblen, but it was amazing to see that these things still go on.
You're a Marxist?
No, I'm a committed socialist, but not a Marxist. I favor the socialist model developed by the 19th century French social critic Fourier.
You're a Fourierist?
Yes.
Fourierism was tried in the 19th century and failed. I mean, wasn't Brook Farm Fourierist?
It failed. That's debatable.
Whether Brook Farm failed?
That it ceased to exist, I'll grant you, but whether it was really a failure, I don't think can be definitively said.
Well, for me, ceasing to exist is failure. I mean, that's pretty definitive.
Well, everyone ceases to exist. That doesn't mean everyone's a failure.
Hello and welcome back to all my brothers and sisters and siblings in the indwelling Christ consciousness. Today we are going to be discussing actually some pretty foundational stuff, some sort of theoretical things, but also the historical foundations and the metaphysical principles of what I call New Thought Liberation Theology. So to begin with, most people today associate New Thought with the prosperity gospel, positive thinking, success seminars, and this idea of manifesting wealth, manifesting what you want in 3D reality. But that's actually only part of the story. So the relationship between New Thought and socialism actually, has often been forgotten and eclipsed by the association of metaphysical religion with individual success. But in its formative years, New Thought contained a strong current of social reform, feminist activism, and even socialist advocacy. Rediscovering this hidden history opens the door for what I call, again, New Thought Liberation Theology, a metaphysical socialism rooted in divine immanence, human unity, and a call to justice. The need for such a framework has never been greater. We live in a time of spiritual confusion, economic division, and political upheaval. Many are hungry for a vision that unites metaphysical principles with a commitment to social justice. There's a growing need for a spiritual philosophy that honors both the inner life of the soul and the outer life of community. So in my view, Butterworth says we live life from inside out. But how would our thoughts affect the outside world if the outside world was not affected by our thoughts, right? So there has to be a dialectical relationship between inner and outer. We are affected by other people's thoughts and other people's actions, just as we affect other people's thoughts and actions through our thoughts and actions. So originally, New Thought emphasized the indwelling presence of God, creative power of the mind, and the possibility of regeneration into new life. Its teachers understood that metaphysical truths were not meant just for private gain, but for the healing of the whole of humanity and the whole community. But these teachings have been diluted, redirected, and even weaponized into hyper-individualistic success narratives. And I think Jordan Peterson might be an example of that, and others. But these narratives sanctify greed and elevate ambition over collective well-being. This distortion reached its peak in the 20th century as New Thought principles were harnessed in service of capitalist triumphalism. And out of this fusion emerged what I call Mammonite metaphysics. And I think our current president, Donald Trump, is a perfect example of this Mammonite metaphysics. What I mean by that is a prosperity ideology in which material wealth is mistaken for divine favor and worldly success is equated with spiritual superiority. One example is Napoleon Hill, author of Think and Grow Rich. His metaphysics were not born of prophets or mystics, but from his worshipful relationship of capitalist Andrew Carnegie, one of the most ruthless steel magnates of the Gilded Age, known as a robber baron. Hill rebranded affirmations and creative thoughts as tools for competitive accumulation. The individual intelligence he invoked was the cold voice of the marketplace rather than the God of justice and compassion. His system rewarded mental discipline with wealth, but the moral dynamics of divine law, including equality, humanity, and love, were discarded in favor of a metaphysical capitalism that was designed to crown winners in a zero-sum game. Where there's winners, there were losers. So Hill was involved in countless scams, actually. He actually admitted to this later in life. But one of his earliest scams involved buying lumber on credit and then never paying his suppliers and selling the lumber to others for cash at rates well below market value. This, as you can guess, did not last very long before Hill went on the run from the law, because it's illegal. But that was just one of the many scams that Hill would try over the years. Napoleon Hill was a man whose entire racket was about reinvention, selling himself and his ideas as transformative. I think we can also think about Mike, the My Pillow guy, right? He's sort of one of these people. I used to be addicted to crack, but then I found Jesus and I started a successful pillow business. But going back to Hill, from his involvement with the scandalous Royal Fraternity of Master Metaphysics that used Think and Grow Rich as their most holy book to the embezzlement from his own charity, the most fascinating aspects of Hill's many misdeeds have been forgotten to history. And then there was Norman Vincent Peale, author of The Power of Positive Thinking, and I do like a lot of both Peale and Hill's. There's a lot of wisdom in what they have to say. But for Peale, so he translated New Thought into a user-friendly kind of Protestantism. He didn't really consider himself to be a New Thought person. He was just a Protestant Lutheran preacher, right? His theology shaped the worldview of Fred Trump, the father of our President Donald Trump. Donald later called Peale the greatest speaker I ever saw. So here metaphysical principles became entangled with American exceptionalism, racial hierarchy, and authoritarian prosperity politics. Trumpism itself can be understood as a metaphysical heresy, a fusion of nationalism, racism, and Mammonite metaphysics into a pseudo-religion of domination disguised as divine destiny. But this was not the original vision of New Thought. Against this backdrop, we're called to recover its hidden radicalism and realign it with the biblical call for justice and for compassion and for the shared abundance of the kingdom of God. As Jesus warned in Matthew 6:24, you cannot serve both God and mammon. So mammon is the god of the love of money. Yet even beyond the problem of greed, New Thought has also sometimes stumbled in its treatment of suffering itself. Too often evil has been explained away as a mere absence of good or an illusion to be dismissed by higher realms of thought. As Eric Butterworth reminds us, such explanations collapse in the face of something like Auschwitz, or we could even say in terms of the current genocide going on in the Middle East, or the grief of a parent who has lost a child, an unexpected death. Channeled aphorisms like nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, may offer comfort to some, but they fail to grapple with the lived reality of human tragedy. Here the insights of Hegel, again, are vital. Suffering is not denied by Hegel, but recognized as part of the dialectic of spirit, in which both idea, God's perfect will, and nature, the world in its limitations, which includes evil, are necessary in the synthesis of unfolding freedom. Spirit doesn't prevent suffering, but spirit transforms it into a higher realization of God's presence in history. So Butterworth highlights this Hegelian truth. Our power does not lie in avoiding all evil. It lies in our unlimited capacity to transform evil into good. This perspective also dovetails with what Mitch Horowitz's calls for a more mature, positive thinking. Instead of blaming victims or clinging to single super law of mind, we can affirm that spirit is always at work in the dialectic of history, drawing us towards freedom. Affirmative thought is one ray of light, but it shines alongside courage, sacrifice, forgiveness, and the capacity to wrest meaning out of our suffering. This theology affirms Paul's conviction that all things work together for good to them that love God, Romans 8:28. This is because spirit works even in the darkest realities to bring forth new life. The cross itself is an archetype of this truth, the moment of apparent defeat transformed into a wellspring of resurrection. So from here, New Thought Liberation Theology denies that true prosperity is found in private accumulation, domination, and alignment with empire. It affirms that prosperity is the collective flourishing of all, the empowerment of the oppressed, and our participation in the spirit-led unfolding of a just, loving, and liberated world.
Just the philosophy of New Thought itself, which holds to the principle that thoughts are causative. If one really believes that, if one really takes that seriously, at least as a prospect, if one takes that seriously, it gives you a revolutionary tool with which to work. And I deeply want to see people work with those tools. There is power there. There's also disappointment, there's confusion, there's tears, there's all the other things that life brings to us. But there is power there. And that power, in some ways, has been repackaged and sort of sold back to us. What was it the Clash sang? Turning rebellion into money. It always happens. We live in a consumer society. Some of you may have seen the other day, I'm posting pictures of my little Kleenex packages that say things like, seize the day. And it's like, I don't really thank you, Kleenex company, but, you know, I'll stick with Marcus Aurelius.
This whole thought came about after Walter D. Wattles wrote the book, The Science of Getting Rich. It's the little green book that Rhonda Burns read after her father passed away that created the DVD, The Secret. Some of you have seen The Secret, and the rest of you will see it at some later date. Some of the people on The Secret were Michael Beckwith, Jack Canfield, and of course Bob Proctor. Those three guys got together and decided to create the Science of Getting Rich Club.
A whole range of interesting people. And here she chats with Dr. Norman Vincent Peale.
Things, Phyllis, that I ever learned in my life, and I can remember the exact day that I learned it. I was sitting on a Lehigh Valley train years ago in the dining car, and I had a book there by Frank Laubach. Now, Frank, in my opinion, is one of the greatest saints of our time. And he said we got to learn to pray in fractional moments. In other words, take the fractional time of the day and use that for prayer. You don't just say, I'm going to take 10 minutes and go apart and have a prayer in the morning. That's good. I'm for that. But say you're in the taxi cab. Well, you've got a little time to wait between your before you get to your destination. Talk to the Lord. Suppose you're sitting in a dentist's office and the dentist isn't ready for you yet. You pray, and believe me, I would pray if I was there.
Enacting on, and they're starting to come up with new companies, and it's just fascinating. Am I right? No one will let you think negative.
No, certainly. Then in the multiple streams of income, too. Actually writing on a piece of paper all the multiple streams of income that one could possibly ascertain, and then taking that into your next business day.
Yeah.
Is profound.
William James, another great leader in studies of the human mind, died in 1910. A young newspaper reporter had already begun exploring the minds of America's greatest men. Here he is, 53 years later, Dr. Napoleon Hill.
Thank you very much. My greatest book, Think and Grow Rich, was written in the White House in 1933 in the most intense surrounding of negative attitude I've ever witnessed in my entire life, which is evidence, I think, of the fact that there are ways and means of maintaining a positive mental attitude even though you're surrounded with negative influences. The subject of a positive mental attitude is so very important that I want you to know I'm working from a script because I want this lecture to be letter perfect. A positive mental attitude is a state of mind which the individual must create and maintain by methods of his own choice through the operations of his own willpower based on motives of his own adoption. In the printed lesson on this subject, many suggestions are offered as to practical methods by which the individual may take possession of his own mind and develop the habit of directing the mind in a positive mental attitude. There are so many people in this world who can see the hole in the donut, but they cannot see the donut around the hole. One with a positive mental attitude sees the hole in the donut all right, but he also sees the donut around the hole. Nothing constructive and worthy of man's efforts ever has been or ever will be achieved except that which comes from a positive mental attitude based upon a definite purpose and activated by a burning desire and intensified until the burning desire is elevated to the plane of applied faith.
So actually throughout Christian history, mystical and social reform impulses have often intersected in the American context. These impulses have often merged with transcendentalist thought in the United States. Emanuel Swedenborg, the 18th century Swedish mystic, envisioned heavenly societies that were governed by love and use, in which each individual's spiritual development harmonized with the collective welfare. His writings emphasize that divine order manifests in social life and as well as in personal life. Heavenly societies thrive when each person contributes according to their gifts, reflecting a spiritual economy of mutual service and care. Charles Fourier imagined future communal orders, phalanxes, in which divine harmony would manifest through cooperative labor, shared abundance, and social independence, integrating spiritual, emotional, and economic life. Ralph Waldo Emerson and the Transcendentalists provided a distinctly American lens for these ideas. Emerson's concept of the oversoul, the universal divine spirit connecting all beings, underscored the inherent unity and humanity of the presence of God within each individual. This metaphysical vision became a philosophical foundation for later New Thought thinkers who emphasized the divine power and creative potential of the human mind. For Emerson, moral and social improvement were inseparable from spiritual revelation. Individual awakening to the oversoul would naturally produce ethical behavior, communal harmony, and social justice. These ideas found concrete expression in the Brook Farm movement, founded by George Ripley in the 1840s. Brook Farm was influenced by Charles Fourier's phalanxes as well as Emersonian transcendentalist ideals. They sought to integrate intellectual, spiritual, and labor activities and create a cooperative community where education, work, and worship were all intertwined. Like the Shakers before them, which we'll mention in a minute, Brook Farmers emphasized the sanctity of ordinary labor. Every act, whether it be gardening, teaching, or literary work, was an opportunity to cultivate virtue, foster creativity, and manifest divine order in daily life. Their experiment demonstrated that the philosophical and spiritual principles of Emerson's oversoul, Fourier's cooperative economics, and the coming New Thought conviction of mind power, which at this time was expressed in the Mesmerist movement, could be tested in lived social structures that integrated personal growth with collective welfare. Other American communal experiments, such as the Hopedale Christian Socialists, the Oneida Community Bible Communists, and the Harmonial Spiritualists, similarly sought to make divine order tangible in earthly society. The Shakers followed the motto, "Hands to work, hearts to God." They combined rigorous labor and ecstatic worship with communal discipline. This demonstrated that daily work itself could be sacred when it was aligned with spiritual principles. Central to their faith were two guiding concepts: simplicity and gifts. To make something well, whether it be a broom, a chair, or a garden, was in itself an act of prayer. Their aesthetic and spiritual vision suffused all activity. Order, industriousness, communal living, and making ordinary things beautiful were sacred duties. The Shakers' understanding of spiritual gifts resonates deeply with New Thought principles. The Spirit, the I Am, is omnipresent and omnipotent. offering abundant blessings in all areas of life, including work, relationships, health, and intellectual pursuits. Often these gifts are blocked by distraction or misalignment, but through meditation, reflection, and conscientious practice, one can remove these blockages and receive the Spirit's abundance fully. Paul captures this principle in 1 Corinthians 12, verses 4 through 11, where he emphasizes that Spirit distributes gifts not for personal glory, but, quote, for the common good. Spiritual gifts need not be dramatic. Even the simplest act, if performed in harmony with divine will, participates in that flow of grace. Jesus affirms this in Matthew 17, 20 through 21, where he teaches that faith, even a very small amount of faith, like a mustard seed, can move mountains, making the impossible possible. Annie Ricks Militz, an early New Thought teacher, expanded on this ethos with her concept of spiritual housekeeping, bridging the sacred and the everyday. Drawing on Shaker practices and her studies of spiritualism, she taught that ordinary work, whether it be housework, professional labor, or self-care, could become a spiritual discipline. In her 1910 book, Spiritual Housekeeping, Militz writes, "Your body is your house, your mentality is your garden, your character is your earth. All these are subject to your spirit, the master of the house. In this temple house of God, your thoughts and feelings, as well as the members of your body, can hold devotional services daily by doing all things for the Lord only. There is no piece of work but what may be sacrament and an opportunity for bring forward the high and holy one who is on his way, proving himself all in all." So Militz's practical guidance demonstrates the interplay of spiritual insight and everyday labor. Every day of the week is associated with specific activities in her book, which are infused with mindfulness. For example, Sunday for meditation and stilling the mind, Monday for cleansing garments, symbolizing cleansing thoughts and intentions, Tuesday for ironing, symbolizing smoothing relationships and harmonizing the home, Wednesday for mending, practicing healing and reconciliation, Thursday for gardening, cultivating the divine in self and others, and Friday for home aesthetics, harmonizing beauty and function. Saturday is for completing challenging tasks with grace and intention. In every instance, Militz emphasizes that work is a medium of divine expression, echoing Shaker practices and the broader New Thought principle that spiritual gifts manifest through ordinary life. Russian writer Leo Tolstoy's The Kingdom of Heaven is Within You also offers a complementary perspective on this dynamic between the inner moral awakening and social transformation. Tolstoy insisted that true social reform arises from the conscience of the individual rather than external coercion or political force. Nonviolence, simplicity, and ethical integrity in daily life are the foundation of a just society. Like the Shakers, Brook Farmers, and Militz, Tolstoy saw ordinary acts, such as how one treats their neighbors, conducts business, or resists oppression, as spiritually significant. Violence and institutionalized coercion only perpetuate injustice, whereas personal alignment with divine law, love, forgiveness, and compassion creates the conditions for social harmony. In this sense, Tolstoy's moral vision reinforces the Shaker, Militz, and transcendentalist conviction that spiritual and social orders are inseparable. Inner transformation inevitably produces ethical, cooperative, and peaceful communities. Together, these historical examples illustrate a recurring pattern. Spiritual insight consistently calls adherence towards communal care, social experimentation, and the practical realization of justice on earth. Love, mindfulness, and conscientious work transform the ordinary into the sacred. It links personal spiritual awakening to collective ethical action. This lineage laid the foundation for later New Thought Liberation Theology, showing that metaphysical understanding, ethical labor, and social responsibility have long been intertwined in the Western spiritual imagination.
Into prayer. Seems like the breaking of bread here refers to the Lord's Supper, which means they had it daily in each other's homes. Verse 43, a sense of fear seized all of them. We get the English phobia. Everyone and many wonders and works were done by the apostles, and all believers held everything together in common. You say, oh, communism. This was the earliest attempt at unity, but later didn't work and was abandoned, but they tried to hold all things.
Thinking is Being teaches us how to examine and alter our thinking to bring truth and harmony into our lives. All the Bible quotes are from Matthew chapter 5.
Ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven.
In this wonderful passage, Jesus is addressing those who have awakened to the understanding of material bondage and have acquired some spiritual understanding of the nature of being. That is to say, he is addressing those who understand the meaning of the allness of God or good and the powerlessness of evil in the face of truth. Such people he describes as being the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And indeed, that is not too much to claim for those who understand the truth and who really live the life that corresponds to it. It is possible, and in fact only too easy, to accept these vital principles as being true, to love the beauty in them, and yet not to put them constantly into practice in one's own life. But this won't work, because in that case, the salt has lost its savor, and is good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden underfoot. If you understand and accept the teachings of Jesus, and make every effort to practice them in every department of your own daily life, if you seek systematically to change in yourself everything that keeps you from God, such as selfishness, pride, vanity, promiscuity, self-righteousness, jealousy, self-pity, resentment, condemnation, and so forth, not by feeding or nourishing them by giving in, but starving them by refusing to give them any thought or expression. If you extend the right thought loyally to every person or thing in your life, especially to the people or things you dislike, then you are among those called the salt of the earth. If you truly live this life, then it doesn't matter in the least what your present circumstances may be, or what difficulties you may have against you. You will triumph over them all and make your demonstration, and you will be in every positive and literal sense a healing and illuminating influence on all around you, and a blessing to the whole human race.
Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid.
The state of your soul.
Something also that Wallace Wattles, another New Thought teacher who I mentioned earlier, who actually ran on the Socialist Party ticket for governor and for senator. Now I can't recall the details of which state, but something he wrote in 1905 in The Law of Opulence, which has been a pretty influential piece on my thinking. He says, no separation of a part from the whole in any way will solve the problem. The community scheme, now he's talking about sort of utopian communities like the Fourierist communities in the 1840s and the ones that I study. And again, remember, this is a little bit closer to that history, 1905. So he says the community scheme is inconvenient, unnatural, and impractical. Shall we establish socialism and the cooperative commonwealth? We cannot do it because socialism and the cooperative commonwealth can never be established. It must establish itself, and it may take a long time yet to do so, but hopefully not too long now, right? Given the state of the world. We cannot do away with competition by legislative enactment of any kind so long as the majority of men believe in limiting supply. So we must keep right on in business under the present system and yet cease to compete. And then he talks about some ways
moves, which is made just the other day by this fellow from Canada, Jordan Peterson. He makes a very classical move, which is totally, it's illegitimate, illogical. He denounces Marxism because of bad things that happened in Russia. Now, there's no doubt bad things happened in Russia. No one's going to argue with him about that. But that's really got very little to do with a critique of Marxism, because Marxism is many other things, including bodies of thought very critical of what happened in Russia, critical long before Mr. Jordan Peterson ever figured it out, and all of that is ignored. It's as if I said to you, you should dismiss Christianity because the Catholic Church had an inquisition back 500 years ago that was really awful, or that Christians massacred the Native American population here in the United States in order to take the land away from them, or there was a Holocaust against Jews and gays and gypsies conducted by a Christian German society. Yes, those things happened, and yes, they were done by Christians. But that's not an argument to reject Christianity, because it's reducing Christianity to these horrible examples, and it's no more legitimate to do that to Marxism.
So actually throughout Christian history, mystical and social reform impulses have often intersected in the American context. These impulses have often merged with transcendentalist thought in the United States. Emanuel Swedenborg, the 18th century Swedish mystic, envisioned heavenly societies that were governed by love and use, in which each individual's spiritual development harmonized with the collective welfare. His writings emphasize that divine order manifests in social life and as well as in personal life. Heavenly societies thrive when each person contributes according to their gifts, reflecting a spiritual economy of mutual service and care. Charles Fourier imagined future communal orders, phalansteries or phalanxes, in which divine harmony would manifest through cooperative labor, shared abundance, and social independence, integrating spiritual, emotional, and economic life. Ralph Waldo Emerson and the Transcendentalists provided a distinctly American lens for these ideas. Emerson's concept of the oversoul, the universal divine spirit connecting all beings, underscored the inherent unity and humanity of the presence of God within each individual. This metaphysical vision became a philosophical foundation for later New Thought thinkers who emphasized the divine power and creative potential of the human mind. For Emerson, moral and social improvement were inseparable from spiritual revelation. Individual awakening to the oversoul would naturally produce ethical behavior, communal harmony, and social justice. These ideas found concrete expression in the Brook Farm movement, founded by George Ripley in the 1840s. Brook Farm was influenced by Charles Fourier's phalansteries, as well as Emersonian transcendentalist ideals. They sought to integrate intellectual, spiritual, and labor activities and create a cooperative community where education, work, and worship were all intertwined. Like the Shakers before them, which we'll mention in a minute, Brook Farmers emphasized the sanctity of ordinary labor. Every act, whether it be gardening, teaching, or literary work, was an opportunity to cultivate virtue, foster creativity, and manifest divine order in daily life. Their experiment demonstrated that the philosophical and spiritual principles of Emerson's Oversoul, Fourier's cooperative economics, and the coming New Thought conviction of mind power, which at this time was expressed in the Mesmerist movement, could be tested in lived social structures that integrated personal growth with collective welfare. Other American communal experiments, such as the Hopedale Christian Socialists, the Oneida Community Bible Communists, and the Harmonial Spiritualists, similarly sought to make divine order tangible in earthly society. The Shakers followed the motto, "Hands to work, hearts to God." They combined rigorous labor and ecstatic worship with communal discipline. This demonstrated that daily work itself could be sacred when it was aligned with spiritual principles. Central to their faith were two guiding concepts: simplicity and gifts. To make something well, whether it be a broom, a chair, or a garden, was in itself an act of prayer. Their aesthetic and spiritual vision suffused all activity. Order, industriousness, communal living, and making ordinary things beautiful were sacred duties. The Shakers' understanding of spiritual gifts resonates deeply with New Thought principles. The Spirit, the I Am, is omnipresent and omnipotent, offering abundant blessings in all areas of life, including work, relationships, health, and intellectual pursuits. Often these gifts are blocked by distraction or misalignment, but through meditation, reflection, and conscientious practice, one can remove these blockages and receive the Spirit's abundance fully. Paul captures this principle in 1 Corinthians 12, verses 4 through 11, where he emphasizes that Spirit distributes gifts not for personal glory, but, quote, for the common good. Spiritual gifts need not be dramatic. Even the simplest act, if performed in harmony with divine will, participates in that flow of grace. Jesus affirms this in Matthew 17, 20 through 21, where he teaches that faith, even a very small amount of faith, like a mustard seed, can move mountains, making the impossible possible. Annie Ricks Militz, an early New Thought teacher, expanded on this ethos with her concept of spiritual housekeeping, bridging the sacred and the everyday. Drawing on Shaker practices and her studies of spiritualism, she taught that ordinary work, whether it be housework, professional labor, or self-care, could become a spiritual discipline. In her 1910 book, Spiritual Housekeeping, Militz writes, "Your body is your house. Your mentality is your garden. Your character is your earth. All these are subject to your spirit, the master of the house. In this temple house of God, your thoughts and feelings, as well as the members of your body, can hold devotional services daily by doing all things for the Lord only. There is no piece of work but what may be sacrament and an opportunity for bring forward the high and holy one who is on his way, proving himself all in all." So Militz's practical guidance demonstrates the interplay of spiritual insight and everyday labor. Every day of the week is associated with specific activities in her book, which are infused with mindfulness. For example, Sunday for meditation and stilling the mind, Monday for cleansing garments, symbolizing cleansing thoughts and intentions, Tuesday for ironing, symbolizing smoothing relationships and harmonizing the home, Wednesday for mending, practicing healing and reconciliation, Thursday for gardening, cultivating the divine in self and others, and Friday for home aesthetics, harmonizing beauty and function. Saturday is for completing challenging tasks with grace and intention. In every instance, Militz emphasizes that work is a medium of divine expression, echoing Shaker practices and the broader New Thought principle that spiritual gifts manifest through ordinary life. Russian writer Leo Tolstoy's The Kingdom of Heaven is Within You also offers a complementary perspective on this dynamic between the inner moral awakening and social transformation. Tolstoy insisted that true social reform arises from the conscience of the individual rather than external coercion or political force. Nonviolence, simplicity, and ethical integrity in daily life are the foundation of a just society. Like the Shakers, Brook Farmers, and Militz, Tolstoy saw ordinary acts, such as how one treats their neighbors, conducts business, or resists oppression, as spiritually significant. Violence and institutionalized coercion only perpetuate injustice, whereas personal alignment with divine law, love, forgiveness, and compassion creates the conditions for social harmony. In this sense, Tolstoy's moral vision reinforces the Shaker, Militz, and Transcendentalist conviction that spiritual and social orders are inseparable. Inner transformation inevitably produces ethical, cooperative, and peaceful communities. Together, these historical examples illustrate a recurring pattern. Spiritual insight consistently calls adherence towards communal care, social experimentation, and the practical realization of justice on earth. Love, mindfulness, and conscientious work transform the ordinary into the sacred. It links personal spiritual awakening to collective ethical action. This lineage laid the foundation for later New Thought Liberation Theology, showing that metaphysical understanding, ethical labor, and social responsibility have long been intertwined in the Western spiritual imagination.
Not confined or bound to materiality. It is the same as the principle of mathematics. The principle of mathematics is intangible. The principle of mathematics is impersonal. If I can bring the millions into subjection by my teaching and cause them to be law-respecting citizens and law-abiding citizens, do you not think it is worth considering? Then consider this peace mission movement from this angle of expression in the name of the International Righteous Government Convention as a sample and as an example to be the leaven to leaven the whole world with righteousness, truth, and justice. If I can bring the millions into subjection, the Constitution of this great country, and you will find all nations will be blessed according to myself as an individual, and this peace mission movement that is actually under my personal jurisdiction. Why should men live in lacks and wants when we are in a country of a plenty? There is a full and a plenty for each and every individual. There should not be one boy or girl, man or woman in lacks or wants or limitations in this great civilization. For we are in a country of a plenty. If each and every individual will be privileged to serve God to the dictates of his own conscience, his highest intuition will give him the victory, for I have brought the victory with me. All into action this afternoon, which and all understanding.
Christian.
Appeal to the great nations of the world. Praise everyone. Righteousness, truth, and justice. Yea, righteousness, justice, and truth. These qualities I have brought into action. Religion, but I have lifted up a standard for all humanity according to the Scripture, and all of them must recognize it, or I shall bring the true legality